Do we live in the best of all possible worlds? Must we accept a world plagued by war and tyranny? Can humans flourish in the absence of freedom and equal treatment? If you answered no to these questions, you share some core beliefs with the liberal theory of international relations, one of the dominant and traditional theoretical approaches in the discipline. Liberalism is not just a theory. It's also an ideology made up of moral and political doctrines, beliefs and ideals. As theory and as ideology, it straddles the Great Divide, offering a perspective on both domestic and international politics. Liberalism didn't enter the political vernacular until the 19th century, when a Spanish political party adopted the name. But the intellectual resources on which modern liberalism draws have deeper historical roots. The origins of liberalism can be found in three areas of early modern thought: rights discourse, perpetual peace plans, and commercial discourse. First, rights discourse. To this day, in the form of human rights discourse remains one of the defining features of liberalism. The struggle for rights was central to both the American and French revolutions in the late 18th century, and in many subsequent anti-colonial wars of independence. But one of the most influential treatises on rights was penned a century before by the Englishman John Locke in his two treatises of government. At a time when Europe was beset by civil and religious wars on the one hand, and tyrannical forms of government on the other, Locke was concerned about the state's growing ability to exercise unchecked, arbitrary power against the rights citizens have to life, liberty and property. Only government based on the consent of the governed, he argued, could be legitimate and would protect individual rights. Modern liberal democracies claim to be the most effective form of government for achieving those political ends. Second, perpetual peace plans. War has proven to be inevitable in a system where states are left to pursue their own interests without sufficient domestic or international restraint. Thinkers such as the 18th century German philosopher Immanuel Kant have argued that an institutionalised, rules-based system was necessary to prevent states from resorting to war to resolve disputes. The 20th century establishment of international organisations such as the League of Nations and its successor after World War II, the United Nations, are extensions of this thinking. They not only aimed to preserve peace by institutionalising a system of collective security, they aimed to provide a permanent, multilateral, rules-based forum for states to engage in dialogue and cooperation over a range of global issues. These organisations have also incorporated, with different degrees of success, the liberal discourse on rights. American President Woodrow Wilson, a leading advocate for the establishment of the League of Nations, believed that a lasting peace required the reordering of international relations on liberal principles. Core to his vision were government by consent, some form of democracy, the equality of nations, that is, self-determination for small, imperially ruled nations, and international cooperation and trade. Third, commercial discourse. For Enlightenment thinkers like Montesquieu, David Hume and Adam Smith, there was a reciprocal relationship between commerce and liberty. Free trade, it was believed, contributed to the refinement of manners and good government, with the consequence that individual liberty and security were enhanced. The spirit of commerce, to use Montesquieu's phrase, had the beneficial international effect of pacifying nations by increasing mutual understanding and economic interdependence. Modern liberal democratic states continue to embrace this view through their bilateral and multilateral trade agreements, as well as through membership of organisations like the OECD and the WTO. These discourses have been modified and combined in different ways to produce modern liberal internationalism. One of the most interesting developments is the democratic peace theory. Michael Doyle has argued that liberal internationalism has resulted in the pacification of relations among liberal states. In other words, liberal democratic states have created a separate zone of peace among themselves. The historical record shows, says Doyle, that liberal democracies do not fight wars against each other. They exercise peaceful restraint and establish security communities to avoid conflict. Doyle is quick to remind us, however, that this zone of peace has not stopped liberal democracies from waging war against non-liberal states. Liberal democracies have embarked on numerous wars. Some have been in self-defence, but many have been unjust and imprudent wars of choice, to colonise new territories or to punish weaker states for alleged transgressions. Since the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, the American government has pursued wars of regime change designed to export democracy to authoritarian countries through force. These military campaigns have been far from successful and have come at a high price in terms of lives lost and infrastructure destroyed. Liberalism's overriding aim to secure the political conditions necessary for the exercise of freedom remains laudable. The dangers of war and tyranny are as real today as they've ever been, and not just in places like Syria. Liberal democracies have been just as guilty as any other form of government in perpetuating and amplifying the dangers of war and tyranny. So, where does this leave the ideology of liberalism? Has it been the force for moral and political progress that it purports to be? Has it enlarged the spheres of freedom? For whom and at what price? And as a theory of international relations, can liberalism provide a persuasive account of a world in which its own ideology contributes to the pathologies it diagnoses?